That's great, Harold. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm really glad you're here. Today's session is on management pack authoring tools and techniques. So we'll be looking at the various ways you can create management packs, the tools you can use, some of the advantages and disadvantages of them all. So let's get into this fairly quickly. Management packs ultimately are just a big chunk of XML. There's a lot of relationships between the various parts of it, but everything that authors management packs eventually is creating or modifying this big chunk of XML. So one of the ways you can do this is you can just use an editor like Notepad++. And this is an example of the Microsoft SQL Server Windows Monitoring MP. Now, this is a big MP. Let's not make any excuses for that. It is, in fact, about 99,000 lines of code here. There's a bunch of different sections here. For instance, there's a manifest which tells the name and the version number. It has references because management packs almost always build on other management packs. They'll provide discoveries or classes or module types, and so you reference them from other classes. Then there's other things like type definitions. I'm not even going to show the schema types here. You'll probably never deal with them. Module types, data source module type. This defines how data is collected and processed. There's just a couple things I want to show here. This configuration says, what are the properties that can be passed into this module type? So there's a machine name, a NetBIOS name, etc., timeouts, this sort of stuff. It also says what's overridable. So you can change that SQL timeout, for instance. And then it says how this is implemented. Now, this is a composite monitor. It's built on top of other monitors, and those are the ones that would be referenced from other management packs typically. For instance, this condition detection is built on the system expression filter, which is defined in the system reference management pack. That's an alias that was shown above. And this is the configuration being passed into this other data source. This is the configuration being passed into the system expression filter. While you certainly can create all of this stuff using a text editor, whether it's Notepad, Notepad++, Visual Studio, Vi, whatever your choice of favorite text editors is, you can certainly do it, but it's very complicated. If you were to try to do this, I suspect you'd find yourself wasting huge amounts of time and effort and probably your sanity. I've been working with SCOM and creating management packs for over 18 years now, and I never just use XML editing. But, and of course there's always a but, sometimes you do need to go into the XML to do a bit of editing. And in the example I'll be showing later, I needed to go in and do a small change in the XML. And we'll show that. We'll show how easy it can be to just do minor augmentations, minor changes, but you wouldn't want to create them from scratch, okay? So the next thing that we would look at is the Visual Studio authoring extensions. And let's get right to the correct VM here. So the authoring extensions are provided by Microsoft. They add in support for creating management packs into Visual Studio. So you create a solution, you'd create additional class files in there. These are these MPX files. They're just chunks of XML, but you fill in the content there. One of the really good things about this is that instead of having a 99,000 line text file that you're working with, you have a bunch of smaller pieces. And these are self-contained, and we'll see when we import a fragment. All the parts are there, and they all get merged together. And so it keeps you from having this great, huge monolithic thing, and you have smaller files, these MPX files, for specific things. And that's a really great way of doing things. Just for what it's worth, MP Author and MP Studio have this concept of a MPF file. which is just a list of fragments we want to add to a management pack so that you can add and edit them. It's similar. It's not the same in any stretch, but it is sort of similar. So let's take a look at Visual Studio authoring extensions, and we'll show you, we want to go to here. One of these, there we go. So I added a new unit monitor here, and it fills in just this template here. You have to make changes in the properties window. Now, we would obviously come in and give it a better description, a better display name, and a proper ID for it. Those are easy. Some of the more complex things are the monitor type ID. This is the type of monitor. And so, for instance, I've chosen check NT service state monitor type. It knows from that what the operational states are, and so you can specify that it's running as healthy, not running as critical. That's fine. Where it falls down is the configuration. This is the information you are going to provide to that monitor type to tell it how to monitor. And the only thing they give you is a chunk of XML. You have to know what to fill in here. And in Visual Studio authoring extensions, this is, I don't want to say common, but it happens enough times that, to me, Visual Studio authoring extensions solves half the problems, but leaves probably the most complex part to you. Now, what it does very well, though, is we can use it to do fragments. So I have a fragment file here. I just added an empty fragment here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to come over here. I have loaded one of Kevin Holman's fragments here. I'm just going to copy and paste it in here. Now, as I mentioned, fragments, they work really well because they have all the different parts. So there's a class defined here. There's a discovery defined here. Let's just close that so we can quickly walk down through that. We have the language pack where we have the display strings. We could have knowledge articles in here. All the parts and pieces for one particular bit of monitoring are in one file. And that's what I really like about the MPX things. Now, to use a fragment in Visual Studio authoring extensions, you basically just include the text and you do a search and replace. So we're going to change the company name wherever it occurs. You think I could spell select after 18 years? We'll use case sensitive and whole words so we get the right thing. It replaced it in 9 different places. And just for what it's worth, you can see down here, it's done that replacement. I'm just going to do another one here. We're going to do that. And we're going to call that MPU Fall 2023. We replace that everywhere. Unique ID is a way that Kevin identifies these things so that you can have the same fragment included multiple times without collision, because he uses that unique ID in the name here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace that with the name. Let's say we're going to monitor the spooler. Actually, this is registry, so that doesn't make any sense. Let's just call it A1234. It's a very bad name, but it's just something unique here. Where this falls apart here is we have a registry key path here, and that is used here. We specify the path, and there's no help. There's nothing that can help you fill that in. Now, if you're using the registry editor, you can actually copy, parts of this and include those. We'll see more about this later. You'd have to copy and paste. You certainly, hopefully, don't want to type it all yourself. And that's just one thing that still needs or could use some improvement here. And of course, Silent can help you with that. So let's go on to MP Author Professional, or MP Studio. So Author Professional, this is our authoring only tool. That's largely what it does. So let's talk about the difference between Author Pro and MP Studio. Author Pro is just authoring. MP Studio has all the same authoring. It's 100% the same authoring capabilities, but it's also got full lifecycle control. It has a SQL database that stores all your management packs and some other information, allows you to keep multiple versions, use it with multiple users. We can perform backups and a lot more reporting from your management server or servers. So let's take a look at MP Author. What we want to do is let's create that same service monitor here. So it's all wizard driven. We're going to query, this is the local machine in this case, for the list of services. We could find Spooler down here, which was what I was talking about, but I probably got these in the wrong order or something. I'm sure it's here somewhere. Let's just choose anything. Let's choose branch cache. I don't even know what that is, but it doesn't matter. We're targeting the Windows operating system. Its availability. Service would usually be availability. We produce a name based on the management pack name, the target, the service that we're monitoring, and .service monitor, and then we change this for a display name. These are just examples. This is something to start with. You can certainly change that. So let's say we didn't want to have our display name showing that it was part of the targeted at Windows operating system, because that's almost a given. So we might just change the description of that. Run as is if you need to use different run as credentials. I'll actually be coming back to that in the fact that there's a missing part here. Here's our health. The service is running is healthy. That we show a similar thing in VSAE. Here we can generate an alert. We can fill in all sorts of properties here. And we have the ability to fill in information from the data, from the target, etc. here. I'm not going to do any of that. Then we have our summary. We can go back and we can change anything, or we can create it. Now, let's look at, just give you some idea how quickly and easy it is. If we import fragments, let's look at Kevin's registry key. That was the one we were looking at before. Now, I've already filled in, and we remember things like company ID and app name, so I don't have to type them a second time. I only need to type them a first time. Our unique ID, that looks familiar. Registry key path, we have a browse button here now. So we can browse through software, and we can look at HP, go down here and make sure that this sys-tray thing is here. I don't know what it is. I don't even care what it is. All I want to show you is that with the built-in browser, you can do it all from within one tool. Import, and it's done that quickly. So that gives a pretty quick overview of MP Author, Visual Studio authoring extensions, and editing with Notepad. For the rest of the demonstration, we're going to be going through and using MP Studio. And what I wanted to do was discuss what this is and why we're doing it. So we had a customer request, and just give me a second here. We had a customer request, and he was trying to do a discovery from some information that was in the registry, but there were multiple things that he wanted to create. And there's no built-in way to do that. And that actually came as a bit of a surprise to us. Now, we've already blogged about this. We filed the serial numbers off of his request and put this blog up, and you can get that from silent.com. But I thought I'd go through a different example of that. We don't need any of that. So the situation we have is on a machine, I have multiple mapped drives. So this virtual disk here, H and M, mounted from my demo host machine. That's the host that's running VMs, etc., for my lab environment. These are mounted, and these are mounted as a particular user. So this would be a scenario, for example, where you have services or a long-running task that it needs to access information on various shared disks, mounted disks. You want to detect them. You want to have class instances of them so that you can use them as targets for monitors or rules. You might be looking for files that haven't been processed in a certain amount of time, or too many files, or files that are just too large in these shares. There's 1,000 different reasons you can do it, but until you have a class instance so that you can target, it's very difficult to do this. So what we want to do is we want to create a discovery that's going to look at the registry for a particular user, find the mounted hard disks or mounted shares there, create class instances. Now, in the registry, and I know I already gave a bit of a preview here, it's all under this key, current user network. There are multiple entries for mounted drives. The name is the drive letter, and then there's additional information here. The most interesting one, of course, is remote path. Demo host $, virtual hard disks. That's the actual path to the drive. There's also a connection type. Type 1 tells me that this is actually a file system that's been mounted as opposed to a printer. And I'm also going to pay some attention to the provider name because we really want to do a bit of error checking here. What we want to do is have the discovery run out, look at network, find all of the mounted drives, and create classes with much of this information so that we can target those with further monitors or rules. I won't be showing the monitors and rules here today. We just don't have time for that. But we can go through that. So that's that. Oh, I did find a reference. This actually goes all the way back to Windows 7. This is a reference for those values and tells you what it is. Like most things, if you do a bit of searching, you'll eventually find it. I couldn't actually find anything newer than that. It's probably out there. I just couldn't find it. But this covers everything except for connection flags. I don't know what they do. They weren't used in Windows 7. Doesn't matter. So what we're going to do is we're going to create the management pack. So in MP Studio, in this folder, I'm going to create a new management pack. I'm going to give it a name, MPU fall 2023.shares. Naming here is purely arbitrary. We're going to save it to the store database. We're going to use Windows for SCOM 2022. There's actually no particular reason for that version. And we're going to create the management pack. Now, we need this to run as a particular user. And to do that, we're going to have a secure reference. We're going to have the discovery run using that secure reference, is the run as credentials, and we're going to have to establish them. And there is a bit of a chicken and egg problem here, and I'll show you how to work around that, because I was afraid last night I wasn't going to figure it out. We're going to target this secure reference on Windows operating system. That's also going to be the target of our discovery. We're going to give it a name, and I do want to make sure I get the same name here because I am copying and pasting some other stuff here. So let's just make sure I've got the right name and the right display name. The display name is not nearly as critical. And we'll get rid of the the bullets here. Now, when I did this, the trick I had is that when you create a secure reference, it's a placeholder. It's something that a management pack can reference as saying, this is where you will get the credentials. But you don't actually specify the credentials here. Credentials are done by creating a secure reference override. It would end up in the overrides field, but we don't actually have any support for that. So we have to use the SCOM console to do that. So once we import this management pack, then we'll do the assignment of credentials to the secure reference. That secure reference override is actually going to be deployed in a different management pack. So we don't actually want to start the discovery until the secure reference and the override have been deployed. And I'll talk about that a bit more when we get there. So let's look at the script. So this is actually a fairly typical discovery script. They always start with these three things: the source ID, the managed entity ID, and the computer name. We don't need to worry about those too much. A little bit of this is taken from Kevin Holman. If you're going to steal, steal from the best. I know I've said that before, but it's very true. We define a script name variable and an event ID that we're going to write to. 4109 is actually pretty arbitrary. I just searched through the Ops Manager event log and didn't find anything with a 4109, so I chose that. We create this mom script API object, and this is what we're going to use entirely to talk to SCOM. We're going to log an event that says the script is starting, and we're going to log who we're running as. And the reason for that is we need to run as a particular user because those shares are on a per user basis, they're not on a per system basis. So it's very helpful to log that information. Next thing we want to do is we want to create this discovery data. This is just going to be a placeholder where we fill in the information that we discover. We'll talk about that a bit more. Next thing we're going to do is we're just going to set location in the registry to current user / network. And we're going to get the child item names. Now, what this would be is just a list of the shares. Let's just see if I've actually got that still here. Yeah, H&M. That's all we get out of that. And that's fine. That's really all we want. If we didn't get any, then we're going to log an event that there were no shared drives in the registry. And we'll skip over the else part. We return the discovery data, which is empty at this point. And then we log some information about completion, how long it took, and how many class instances. We'll come back to that. If we do have shares, we're going to do a bunch of error checking here. So we're going to iterate over all of those shares. So we'll look at H, then M. We're going to make sure that that name, the length is equal to 1. Because if it isn't, it's not a drive letter. And for whatever reason, we don't want to consider it. So if that happens, we log a script event and we continue. And the continue here simply goes back and does the next element in shares. If it seems like a valid drive letter, we're going to get this information underneath share, which is all of this information here on the right-hand side. And from that, we can pull out the values for the connect flags, connection type, etc., including the remote path and username. We're going to do a bit more error checking. We want that connection type to be equal to 1. That's a shared drive, otherwise it's a printer. And when we log it, if there is an error, we want to log what we found, because if it's a 3, maybe that is something we care about. So knowing it, what the invalid value was, helps us debug this. We also want to check that the provider name was Microsoft Windows Network, same sort of logic here. The next thing we do, now that we've got all the information we need, is we're going to create a class instance in this discovery data. And so this is a class called Select Share class. This logic here simply replaces that with a GUID. That's how this works. All of these things actually are resolved to GUIDs. Because we're going to use a hosted class, we want it to associate with the computer, so we assign the computer name, the principal name, to the computer name. That will tie our objects to a computer. And then for each of our objects, we're going to fill in drive letter, connect flags, remote path, username, etc. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to assign a display name for this object. And our display name here is actually a bit of a composite. It's the share name, that's the H or the M, and in brackets, the remote path, so that the name that we see in the SCOM console gives us basically all the information we need. Once we've added all those properties, we add this class instance into the discovery data, and we increment a count. So once we've gone through all of our mounted drives, we've audited them to the discovery data instances. We return that discovery data to SCOM. This doesn't actually create the class instance. What it does is it creates a request for SCOM to create a class instance. The distinction, it may be subtle, but it means that this data, when it's returned to SCOM, SCOM then looks at the data, it does a whole bunch of error checking, make sure everything's consistent, and then it will create that class and the class instances. Once we're finished, we're going to figure out how long it took to execute the script. Always helpful. And then we're going to log that the script was completed. We had this many class instances created and how long it ran. So that's our script. Now, let's import that. So let's put that into MP Studio. We're going to create a script class discovery. We're going to look at that script. This is the one we were just looking at. This is the boilerplate at the beginning. We don't need to worry about that. Here, we've pulled out MP Studio and MP Author. We'll look at the script and try to find the class name and the class properties. These are the class properties we found from these lines, add property, drive letter. So we know that that class should have a property called drive letter. So in MP Studio, we have a string property called drive letter. Now, not all of these are strings. The connection flags, the connection type, and the defer flags are integers along with the provider type. So we do want to correct that. And the drive letter, that's something that's unique, and we're going to have multiple ones. So we make that a key property. That allows us to have multiple of these class objects, class instances, on each computer. And that's going to be an important thing. Solid Share class is derived from the name of the class that was in the script, and those have to match, so we don't let you change the name. We do let you change the display name, but that's a pretty good one to start with. We're going to use Windows Local Application as our base class. There are probably other choices that would work well. The important thing here is we want a hosted class. This is the name of the discovery and whether it's enabled. And here's where I'm going to do something unusual. I'm going to disable that to start. And the reason for that is we want to make sure that that secure reference and the secure reference override get distributed before we start the discovery, so that when the discovery is enabled, it is actually going to use the proper information. The proper information as for the run as credentials will already be there. We're going to target Windows operating system. That's a fairly common thing here. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to change this schedule, and I'm going to do something you would never do in practice. I'm going to run this discovery once every minute. And the only reason I'm doing that is for the demo, because once I deploy this and I've set the secure reference and then I enable this, I want it to run and we see the results before the end of this webcast. So here we go. Here's our summary, and we can go finish. Now, as I mentioned, we need to do run as credentials for this discovery, and there was nothing in the wizard that set those the run as credentials. This is where we actually are going to go in and edit that XML. And as I said, I'm copying and pasting so we get the right stuff here. It just goes in here on the data source. The formatting of the lineup doesn't matter here. We just need to tell it that this data source, this Times PowerShell provider, needs to run as that user. What did I do wrong? I've got the wrong name. I thought I typed it correctly. Do not save the changes. Come back to our secure reference here. I cut and paste that, so I don't know why it's wrong. But we can fix that fairly easily. This is one of the reasons we would want, in the discovery wizard, we want to be able to specify that so you just select it. So let's edit our XML and we'll get the correct reference here. Same thing, we want to put it here, paste, and get rid of that. And okay, there we go. We're going to save that MP. I'll talk about this a bit later, but for the time being, we'll just let that get saved. We have our shares here. This is version 1001. This is the one that was just created. So I'm going to deploy that. We're going to deploy it to my SCOM 2022 management server here, and it starts deploying in the background here. That won't take too long. I actually resized the management server and the SQL machine last night to speed things up. Now, it does take a bit of time for that information to be available here. But let's just see if we at least have the share class available. There it is. So it's available to us already. Obviously, because no discoveries have run, we don't have any instances of that. That's okay. That's what we expected. Now, in our profiles, let me just do a refresh because it probably doesn't show up there yet. We should have MPU, fall, share operating system, secure reference. In our properties here, I'm just going to go to the run as accounts, and I'm going to add a run as account that was previously defined. It's a high privs window account. It's running as the proper user here. And I'm going to save that. And this I know is a little slower. Let's see if it's a bit faster with more database and more processors. And while it's saving, once I start the discovery, I'll bring up the Q&A and we can answer questions while watching for this stuff to run. But hopefully with the schedule running for once a minute, it should be fairly quick if the run as profile will ever get saved. Okay, so that's closed. And just to let you know, the run as credentials were saved in this management pack, Microsoft System Center Secure Reference Override. That is now, because it's been changed, is going to be deployed to the various machines. The MP that we've just created, which there it is, that's also being deployed to machines, but that discovery is disabled. What we want to do now is we can come back here, we'll look under Object Discoveries, we'll search for Select. That's funny. Let's just do a refresh. There we go. We're going to override for all objects. Here's our enabled flag, which is set to false. I'm going to set that to true. I'm going to apply that. At this point, or as soon as it finishes, SCOM will start distributing that updated management pack to the various target machines by anything running Windows operating system. In practice, you'd have a group or something that you'd be controlling the targeting to, but this is sufficient for the time being. At this point, it should start running. It could take a minute or two, so we don't expect to see anything immediately. What I will do is I'll come back here very quickly and we'll go to the event viewer. I just want to do one thing here. 4109 is the event ID that we're looking for. So if we go to the event viewer, we'll do a refresh. What we see is, the 1200s and the 1201s. Here's our new version of the shares MP was received because we changed that override or added that override. And it will come up in a moment or two. In the meantime, if there's anything in the Q&A, can I actually see that? Can I see the Q&A? Something about Kevin, changes. That actually all seems to be from Anchor's talk. So I think we're okay there. Let me just check the chat. I guess we record the meetings. 901, okay, so that's all there as well. So that's fine. So let's go back to monitor here. We do have new events. So here's our 4109s. So the script is starting and we know it's running as the proper user here. And so it finished and it submitted 2 class instances, which is what we expect, the H and the M, and it took 2.4 seconds to do that. So if we come back here and do a refresh, there's our objects. So as you can see here at the bottom, here's our display name, M, with the path. We have this full path here, so we know what machine it's on, and the drive, and the remote path, our connection types, defer flags, drive letters, remote path, all that information is here. And we certainly could use that for various monitors. Because we don't have any questions, the one other thing I wanted to talk about, since we do have a couple of seconds here, is we have a new fragment that I did want to show off. I just wasn't sure I was going to have enough time here. We want to search for it, and it's written by Mike Sargent. It's our HTTP request fragment. And what we have is a name that we're going to fill in. So we're going to call SILEC. We're going to monitor silec.com, www.silec.com. Our morning threshold, we expect response in, let's say, 500 milliseconds. Anything below that is fine. But if it takes over 2 seconds, let's say 2000 milliseconds, we want it to generate an error. So we filled in all those parameters. As you can see, we show immediately what the result will be here. So for instance, where I've chosen SILEC for a company ID, you'll see that it's filled in various places here. So that's already done for you. I think there's probably some confusion because I've used the same name for website. So SILEC, let's call it SILEC site. Let's spell site properly. So if we look here, we should see the name SILEC highlighted in a bunch of places. I'm having a bit of trouble with my scrolling. It doesn't seem to want to. SILEC site. The highlighting is supposed to be there. Anyways, the values are all substituted in here. What we have, very quickly, is you've got a data source module type, which has certain parameters that come in, which is the URI, a debug flag, certain things that are overridable. It's going to schedule it to run every interval seconds, and it executes this probe action, passing in the URI and a debug flag. The probe action is the one that actually does things. That's this guy here. It runs a script. The script basically uses the PowerShell measure command and does an invoke web request here. If it succeeds, it records the status code, status description, and raw count length. If it fails, it tries to fill in some reasonable messages here, may log that, and in the end, it fills in a property bag and returns that property bag to SCOM and finishes with logging. On top of that, I think I've scrolled past it, we have a unit monitor type here, and that's going to look at the performance. So that has configurations for the interval URI and the warning and error thresholds. Those are overridable. It executes the data source or the probe action if you're doing an on-demand discovery, and has system expressions so that if the status code equals 200, which is healthy, and milliseconds is less than or equal to the warning threshold, then you're in a healthy state, etc. And we also have a rule which collects that data. It uses that same data source module type and maps it, logs it to the data SCOM database. Here's our monitor that uses the monitor type we saw earlier, passes in the various parameters to it, and we have a view for performance. And you can simply import that, and you're going to be set. So I think I've probably gone past where I should have. Let's just go back and see if there are any further questions.
Yeah, Mike, go to the Q&A section. There is a question on secure reference override.
Yes, the secure reference can go in a different management pack. Then you would reference that management pack in your management pack, and you can just use it. That's perfectly reasonable. And it's probably how I should have done this. It would have simplified things, but I was trying to show it all in one. So anonymous user, that's your answer. If there are any other questions, I will stay online. I'll be looking at those Q&As. So if anything else comes to mind, feel free to ask. I'll be glad to answer those.
Mike, it looks like there might be one more question in the chat window. You want to take a look?
Okay. I don't know that it's best practice, but it's probably a good advice. SCOM spends a lot of time. It's optimized for the monitoring scenario. Deleting things and creating things are done at a lower priority. So yeah, normally you're probably better to allow some time there. Once it gets established, the monitoring is okay. Right now, this thing is still running the discovery every minute, which is stupid fast. But as I mentioned, we only did that for the demonstration. Now that it's working, I would change that down to maybe once a day, or if it's something a little more dynamic, maybe every 4 to 6 hours. That still wouldn't be too large a load on anything, and should be reasonably responsive. Okay.
Okay, that's great, Mike. Maybe just stick around and keep an eye out for anything that's coming in on chat or Q&A. And thank you so much for that session. We're just going to flip back over to the agenda to kind of see where things are at. So yeah, we're actually scheduled for a very, very short break. So go stretch your legs, grab a coffee or tea. And in just a couple of minutes, Bob Cornelissen is going to take us inside SCOM managed instance. So you won't want to miss that. Bob is queued up and we'll be ready to go. And we'll hand it over, Bob, in just, well, I guess about, 3 minutes time.